Good evening and welcome to PyData Manchester, the April edition of our meetup. Yeah, obviously we've not done a proper meetup like this for a little bit, so it's great to be back. As ever, if you want to get involved, please do get in touch. You can find us on @PyDataMCR, and if you join the PyData Slack, there's always good conversation in there. As well, I believe you want to ask a question, there'll be a link to the Slido in the YouTube comments. So yeah, please do get involved. Should take a special moment to thank the UK Data Service, because they've been a huge help in putting this event together. So from a PyData perspective, as ever, it's Joe, Jennifer, and Sean, who along with myself, who are helping put this event together and bringing it live. So yeah, the code of conduct as ever is very important. PyData is a professional environment, and I think it's important that we all, behave as such. If anyone sees or receives any kind of unprofessional behavior, please do contact one of the organizers. You can find our details on the on Twitter, or if you're in the Slack, do reach out to us and we'll do our best to address it. want to say thank you to our sponsors, Horsefly Analytics and Cathcat Associates, along with NumFocus, who help bring the entire PyData stack to all of us, both the PyData meetups and the actual software itself. UK Data Service, who I mentioned, are partnering with us for this event. They're the UK's largest collection of social economic data and more, and you can find more about them at their website. The idea of this event is to build and maintain a whole repository of data questions that are frequently asked. So that's where you can find them after this event on the GitHub, which I'm sure we'll be sharing that later on. So today, the whole point is to address questions that come up again and again in relation to not just data science, not just data engineering, but any kind of data-related career. An awful lot of similar questions come up, and hopefully we can ask them. And today's experts from 4 different perspectives can help and deliver their insights. And the whole point of this event is to kickstart that the resource is being made available. So we've got 4 experts, as mentioned: Eslyn, Tom, Mark Elliott, and Rachel Ainsworth. We'll let them introduce themselves when we get into it. As ever, you can contact us on on Twitter, Slack. We've got a GitHub available, and on the meetup as well. You can contact us and send any messages to us that you want. So without further ado, let's get into it and introduce the panelists. So I think we're all together. So okay, first of all, Rachel, can you introduce yourself, kind of a bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, thanks, John. So thank you for inviting me to this panel. My name is Rachel Ainsworth. I am a research software community manager for the Software Sustainability Institute and based at the University of Manchester. In my previous life, I was an astrophysical researcher at the Jodrell Bank Center for Astrophysics. You can see the big level telescope behind me. So a lot of my perspective today will come from my background in academia and using kind of big astronomical data. But also I established and run the Her Plus Data Manchester meetup for women in data. So I have a lot of anecdotal tidbits I can share to help answer questions around hiring and pursuing careers in various data fields. So thanks for having me.
Thanks, Rachel. Tom, can you introduce yourself?
Yes, sorry, I was on mute. Hi, yeah, my name is Tom Liptrot. I am what am I? I'm a freelance data science consultant. So I do bits of machine learning work and AI sort of consultancy for a whole bunch of different tech firms of one type or another. So I, usually trying to make some kind of machine learning model work in a way that is useful for somebody. With varying degrees of success. But it is. I find the whole field really interesting, and I've been doing things around about this area for quite a long time now. I was previously the head of data science at PKI, which is a fairly successful scale-up company up in Manchester.
Cool, thanks, Tom. Mark, could you introduce yourself?
Hello there, I'm Mark Elliott. So I'm a professor of data science here at Manchester University. And I, amongst other things, I'm director of the data science MSc here at Manchester, and also the PhD program in CDT, Data Analytics and Society. My main areas of research are confidentiality and privacy, and also data science methodology as it's applied to social science research questions. Hey, thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. And Eslyn, we know you're having some technical difficulties with your webcam, but thankfully you're still around. Can you introduce yourself?
Hello, my name is Eslyn Bikumu. So I currently work as a data scientist at Phoenix Medical Supplies. So the company specializes in medicine, distribution, pharmaceutical care, and pharmacy-based primary care services. So we work in partnership with the NHS, the healthcare commissioners, and provide as well as pharmaceutical manufacturers. So that's what we do. So I work there. I've joined them last year in December. And prior to that, I was working as a data engineer for a year. So yeah, so I mean, newbie in the data science world.
Cool. It's great to have your perspective as well. Thanks, Eslyn. Okay, so let's get into our first question, which I think it's perhaps lacking a little bit of context, but I think it gives even more room for your thoughts on this. So, Tom, let's start with you. What or where should I be reading? Books, journals, blog posts, something else?
Oh, I don't know. I guess as a data scientist, probably you should be reading things that are relevant to what your interests are, and that's maybe not a very helpful question, but I guess the field as a whole is rapidly changing, and there's lots of things that come, new developments that appear all the time, and so you kind of, in order to keep up, you have to sort of run in a certain direction, and whether that is reading journals. I would say usually I keep abreast of lots of things on a very surface level, and then occasionally delve much deeper and go into journal articles and books and so on a specific topic that I want to be interested in. But I think it's useful to have a wide range of points of view from just the internet. I use Feedly, and I have a whole bunch of RSS feeds in it, and that's which I've sort of curated over a long period of time, and I find that really useful just for keeping up with lots of different things. I also subscribe to lots of different data science newsletters and write a data science newsletter, which and sometimes ends up with recycled content that everyone is sharing around at the same time. But yeah, so I guess my recommendation would be to subscribe to my data science newsletter and yeah, go on the internet.
A little bit of everything. So it's a good point. Does anyone else have anything to add? Yeah, please.
Okay.
Chime in. Yeah, I appreciate it, Rachel, with your hand up. But please chime in, everyone.
Go ahead, Eslyn.
Hey. Thanks. So I would recommend. There's a book I've been reading. So it's called Introduction to Statistical Learning. I think quite a few of you have probably come across the book, but yeah, I've been reading it, and it's been it's really good. I've learned a lot, and it's good because you have exercises and you could try them yourself. For anybody who doesn't know, it's really good for beginners in data science, and it sort of explains the fundamentals of machine learning and how everything works behind the scenes. So yeah, I would highly recommend the book. And there's another book as well that I'm reading. It's called Applied Predictive Modeling. So it's like a breakdown of the entire modeling process on real world data sets. So yeah, I recommend these two books.
Well, it sounds really fascinating, both from a fundamental and starting to get a bit more applied from a theoretical perspective. Rachel, you're going to say something before?
Yeah, just a couple of recommendations, slightly different to what's already been mentioned, is I also think it's important to not only kind of stay up to date technically, but also to make sure that you're reading about various aspects of bias and diversity within data. So a couple of books include Data Feminism, there's a book called Invisible Women, things like that to kind of raise awareness and kind of the pitfalls of various data issues that have been highlighted by quite a few recent events. But also I find actually podcasts are a really great way of kind of learning more about careers and hearing stories of actual people. So I'll just quickly plug the PyData podcast, as well as the How AI Built This podcast, which I think are really, really valuable in hearing different career paths and journeys into data roles, which can really help kind of inspire people who might not otherwise kind of see that path for themselves.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point, both around bias and, getting other people's perspectives, because it's never quite what you read. It's always a bit more dirty than that. Mark, sorry, have you got anything to add?
Yeah, so I mean, I agree with what all of my colleagues have said and particularly Tom's excellent newsletter. Yeah, so I think this doesn't really matter in one sense. Don't sweat this kind of thing of, am I reading the right stuff too much? Read widely, read lots of different formats. I think the field is moving very quickly. So books are usually some way behind what is kind of new stuff, but you're not going to be able to read everything. You're not even going to be able to read 1% of everything, or even 0.1% of everything. So find something that you like to read, that you have affinity for, and just try and get as much diversity in there as you can in terms of formats, types of authors, different perspectives. That's the really important thing in terms of just getting yourself into a good knowledge space that works for you.
I think that's a really good point to finish up on. And I think as well, it might be worth, all of us putting together some of those recommendations, so and then sharing them afterwards, just so people can find them, because I think there's going to be an awful lot of useful resources within the context, like Mark says, of not being able to read everything. So the next question, I'm going to start with you, Mark. So I'm going to rephrase the question ever so slightly, but of all of the various data-related probing languages and tools and everything, what have you found the most success within your work?
So I'm probably not a very good person to ask this question to, because I'm an old geezer. So yeah, so I mean, I grew up with, I did an AI PhD, and so I learned to program in a language which probably nobody's ever heard of now, called Pop11. And my second language was Lisp, which is kind of arcane sort of language, which a few geeky people use now. So I very recently migrated onto Python, after being badgered by one of my RAs for about 2.5 years that I should stop doing this old fogey stuff and get with the kind of modern world, as it were. So I'm probably not a very good person to ask for that reason. But that's one thing kind of to say. You kind of make these choices early in your career, and then you stick with them because they're what you're used to. And shifting over is a kind of lurch. And what I've found, though, is that most of the tools, you can do most things in most tools. Some things are more difficult in some tools, some things are more difficult in other tools, and probably it doesn't really matter that much. And really, it's the same as my previous answer. Find something that you understand and works for you, and that will be the best way for you to get the best out of your own skill set.
Yeah, I mean, much as you complain about, what was it, Pop11 and Lisp, it's got your hair. So you've certainly done very well with it.
Yeah, best language. Yes.
Sorry, Matt, you're breaking up a little bit there. Eslen, same question to you. Do you have any particular recommendations for software tools?
I would recommend Python. So I've been using Python for, I think, almost 10 years. Yeah, I think Python is very popular, and a lot of people, even those who haven't had any experience with Python, have quickly found out that it's quite easy to learn. And it's used for various tasks like data analysis and visualization, artificial intelligence, and machine learning. So it's sort of high level. And the good thing about it is that you don't have to worry too much about complex tasks such as memory management. So yeah, I would highly recommend Python, mainly because I use it on a daily basis. But yeah, so.
Cool. No, that's a good question. I mean, sorry, good answer. I think, yeah, to Rachel, is there, beyond just languages, I mean, feel free to share language as well, but are there any like tools or other libraries for particular purposes you found, really useful?
Yeah, on languages, I guess I would echo something like Python or R, but because they are great open source communities with a lot of really rich documentation. So if you have any issues or questions, it's easy to get those answered and to find a community around those. But as far as tools, I would highly recommend version control. So using something like GitHub or GitLab or any kind of online repository where you can not only keep track of, the software that you write or use, you're also learning like a valuable skill by doing version control.
Yeah, I would definitely echo that. That's certainly something that's been very valuable for me in the industry. Tom?
Well, I guess from the other people have mentioned Python and R maybe less so. I originally learned to program or started off data science in the world of R about, I don't know, 12 years ago or so, and I've recently, probably over the last 3 or 4 years, mostly transitioned to Python, probably because more of what I'm doing is machine learning-y than statistics-y. But there probably, if I was starting now, I'd learn Python. I guess in terms of tools that are useful or other skills, that probably the single best thing that you could get exposure to as a new data scientist would be some kind of cloud technology. So understanding, make yourself an AWS account and set up some instances and build a API that runs on the web. If you can do that, then you can show that to people, and that would definitely make you stand out. And is stuff that not a lot of data. It's not really taught in universities, as far as I know, and is not that hard to pick up.
Can I jump in really quick with one final anecdote?
Please do.
I've kind of heard from hiring managers, I suppose, that it's a lot less about maybe the tool or language that you're using, but more about what you can do with it. So like, don't feel like you should just slap Python on your CV just to get through. Like, if you can demonstrate some great projects in maybe a lesser known tool, then that's probably a lot more valuable than maybe just the basics of Python.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Anyone else have anything to add? No? Okay. So I don't know if this was written by Tom, but we'll start with you again, Tom. Do you think smaller businesses can benefit from AI, and especially businesses in less populated areas like the Orkney Isles?
No, I didn't write that, but I think I voted it up because of the mention of the Orkney Isles. So I'm from Orkney originally, and have been living down south, as we call it, thanks, for quite a long time now. But I think definitely that smaller businesses can benefit from AI more and more. I guess either as a often a smaller business doesn't have huge amounts of data, but increasingly tools are becoming available that are based on AI or that use machine learning, and you don't need loads of data. So using things like transfer learning, pre-trained language models and computer vision models don't now need a huge amount of data to make useful products out of. So small software businesses can make interesting tools or modify their technology products using AI. You don't have to be a massive company to do that. Most of the tools are free, and all you need is kind of an idea and some a bit of expertise, I suppose. what was the second part? Places like, or I think the main thing that's hard for places like those more remote places is internet access, really. So like fast broadband in places like Orkney is a real problem, and the more that gets rolled out, the better, really. I was recently working actually with a software development company. What are they called? I can't remember their name. Mesomorphic, based up in Shetland, and they're doing really good things, and have managed to get lots of work from Shetland. Everything's remote now, so it doesn't really matter where you are. As long as you've got an internet connection, you can be anywhere and be an AI company if that's what you want to be, or a sheep farmer. That's what you want.
It's all about having the infrastructure, whether it be high-speed internet or the infrastructure of having the right people available to work remotely.
Yeah,
makes sense. Rachel? Oh, sorry, I repeat.
I don't have an answer for this. What was it about AI?
So, I mean, the first part of the question was, how do you think? Do you think that AI can be useful to smaller businesses, not specifically in the Orkneys?
I don't have expertise on this, so I will pass on to
that's fair enough.
Panelists.
That's a good answer that I think we should recommend more and more, to say we don't know. Eslan, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, well, I think for me, I think the most important thing is to sort of deploy the right AI technology, because that can save you time and money by automating and optimizing routine processes and tasks. And another thing I would say is it's good because you can make faster business decisions based on like outputs. So yeah, that's the only things I have to add.
Yeah, I think that's fair. It's not a question with an awful lot of context. I'm afraid I don't know who asked it, and I think a lot of these things do definitely depend on the context of the business. Yeah. Mark, are you still around?
I am.
Oh, okay, good.
So AI, yeah. So yeah. So there's so my PhD was in AI, as I flagged earlier on, and it was a sort of on joke, which I think is still relevant, which is AI is AI until it works, and then it's computer science, and then it's computer science until it's deployable, and then it's software engineering. So I think there's a question about what do you mean by AI, because AI as a sort of research function is not at all useful to an SME unless it's in the process of doing that sort of development work. So I assume the frame in the question is about businesses that aren't AI businesses. They're actually businesses that have some other function, and can they use AI tools, which is a very small subset of what AI as a research area covers. And I think it entirely depends on the business, but any data science facing business should certainly be looking at employing relevant applied AI if the business model warrants it.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, understanding the context of the business model and choosing the appropriate tools. Without more context, I'm not sure we can answer that question any more fully. So Eslan, a question for you. So if I remember correctly, you've got a background in maths. Do you need to be good at maths and statistics to be a good data scientist? Does one need formal training?
I think, well, how do I answer this? I think it helps to be good at maths and and stats. However, I also feel like if you're really passionate about or curious to find out more about data science, there are so many online courses nowadays, so you can actually learn a lot and actually eventually become good. Because if you're passionate about something and you actually invest the time, I'm sure you'll become better. Yeah. So yeah, I think the online courses will also help you to improve both your math skills and your stats skills. So yeah, it helps to be good, but I think the resources are out there.
I think that makes sense. And yeah, certainly from someone who's not that good at maths, I can agree with that. Anyone else want to chime in?
I think that my view on this is that it's harder to teach yourself maths than it is to teach yourself coding, and that it benefits from being taught in some kind of structured way. But I find it quite easy to sit down and follow a tutorial how to build an API in Python, but I very rarely would sit down and derive the central limit theorem or anything like unless I was forced to. And I think doing, I guess that background is useful, but it tends to. I think it benefits from a formal training. I don't think it doesn't exclude you if you don't have that, but I think it benefits from it.
I think that makes sense. Rachel?
I was just going to say that, yeah, I think it does. Yeah, just to echo what everybody else has said, I think in the context of if you're interviewing for something or applying for a data position, what people are looking for is probably that you can work independently, and that there will be a level of learning on the job. Businesses want you to learn that context, the business context, as well as they might want you to learn specific tools that work in the teams, or maybe they're happy for you to bring your own kind of tool use. But I think if you don't have that passion, like Eslin mentioned, or some kind of experience with and knowledge of stats, then you're going to struggle a lot, and they're kind of looking for you to be able to work independently and not kind of have to start from scratch.
Mark?
Yeah, so I mean, it's a difficult topic. So math skills specifically, no. And there's just distinguish between maths and stats here, because it's stats that you need, not maths. Maths doesn't help you a great deal, in fact. Stat skills definitely are important, and coding skills are very important. So you can't get away from that. You've got to pick up some of those skills somehow, and there's lots of ways you can do that. So our MSc program is being deliberately designed as an interdisciplinary program, which means we take students from any discipline. We have no prerequisite discipline. One of Joseph's colleagues at the UK Data Service, who was actually a graduate from that program, actually came from history of art. That was her undergraduate degree. And she passed really well and now got a data science facing job. So, I mean, it doesn't require that you've been a maths person all your life. I think that's the thing to say about that. I think these skills are something that any intelligent person can pick up to the required standard. And the other thing to say is there are lots of flavors of data scientists. There's not one thing that's a data scientist. And that's one of the sort of reasons for our particular program, where we have different flavors of data scientists represented by different pathways. We have a social science pathway, we have a business pathway, we have an environmental analytics pathway, and they all have different flavors to them and attract different types of incoming students. So I think it's very open, and I think you can acquire the skills. Certainly, I would agree the coding skills are easier to pick up than the stats skills. Going on a stats course, if you haven't got that as a kind of minimum, would be something I think most people would benefit from.
Yeah, I think that's a really important takeaway for anyone kind of thinking about getting into data science, as it were. There are so many different job roles in data science, and I'm pretty sure we've all five of us before Mark left have got different backgrounds and different job roles in data. Oh, hey Mark, good to see you back. Okay, so on Mark's point, are you still around? With the point around Manchester running an MSc program, our next question is, what are the views of the panel around massive open online courses compared to a traditional master's or a PhD, as opposed to, and how do we compare that to someone who just gets a start in industry? So can we start with you for that, Mark?
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, there are advantages to and disadvantages to all of these approaches. I don't think a PhD, unless you're wanting a research career, is a particularly useful way to go in terms of picking up the skills. An intensive master's program certainly is a sufficient introduction to all the necessary components to get you started as data science. MOOCs are valuable. They can be really useful. And we often recommend that students coming from sort of particularly non-technical backgrounds do some sort of MOOC before they join our master's program. But I think that my sort of experience of talking to people who have been through those is that the learning tends to be a little bit superficial. That's certainly been my experience. It's not to say they couldn't be useful, and for a particular person, they may do the job. They certainly have all the content that that you need for learning the basic skills. So I don't have then various forms of self-learning they're all in principle possible, with the caveat of what I said about the statistics, where I think actually is quite difficult to learn. I think the problem with statistics and mathematics in general is that the learning curve is always steep. Wherever you are on the curve, it's going up some more steps is quite steep. So you need some support basically to do that. Whereas coding you can learn by trial and error. If that doesn't work, now I'll try something else. Oh, that worked. I wonder. So you get some feedback from the coding process. You don't get feedback from a proof. It just sits there staring at you on the page, going, I don't know. You tell me. So yeah, I mean that's the important thing. So I would say a lot of it you can pick up from these other sources, and certainly I can see some of them being beneficial. But some formal training at some point is probably needed.
Good answer. Tom?
Yeah, so I think I agree with a lot of what Mark said. I guess with qualifications kind of serve two purposes. One is to teach you stuff, and one is to signal stuff. So it's useful to learn things, but it's also useful to have a sort of badge which separates you from other people. and I think that having it may be an antiquated or old-fashioned view, but having a qualification from a university that people know, like it or not, helps you helps you stand out from people who don't to some extent. There are absolutely exceptions to that, and I've employed people very successfully who've been exceptions to that rule. But it definitely there's a bit of a kind of status game going on there, and I think the MOOCs I think are really good for learning stuff. if you're that way inclined, but they're not always. So two people could do a MOOC. One person would get a huge amount from it and get loads, put loads into it and get loads out of it. Another person might just, skim watch it for, in the background and not participate quite as much. And it's hard as a hiring manager to differentiate those two people. But as an individual, from your own point of view, you can learn as much as you want from a MOOC. I guess I'd probably agree with Mark on the maths and stats part. It is harder to learn in that way, partly because it's just hard to write equations on the computer. It's good to have a blackboard or something. Do you still have blackboards? I don't know. But yeah, that's my rough point of view.
Thanks, Tom. Aslan?
Yeah, I think I agree with Mark and Tom. I think it's very important. I mean, it's good to go to uni and actually get a degree, because you get taught the course really well and in details. and you do course, you have coursework, so that pushes you to really understand the subject. So yeah, I think it's even though I completely understand why people would want to learn from online courses as well, but I always think that it's a lot better when you're actually at uni, for example, because you have a lecturer, you can easily ask them questions. And however, many people, I think, even after uni, I think it's still important to sort of take some online courses for personal enrichment. So a lot of people nowadays enroll with the intent of learning new skills to sort of further their own career goals. So they actually go through different online courses, and I think it's important. But I think the foundation is definitely at a university.
Cool, that makes sense. That's a good answer. Thank you. Rachel?
Yeah, I think that's a really great point about kind of upskilling and keeping up with how fast data science moves or data fields move. The only thing I would add is that I think an online course or MOOC would be really great as a taster. So if you're not sure if data science or data engineering or a data career is for you, I think that would be a great opportunity to give it a try, see what it's about, see if you are interested in learning those skills, and then maybe enrolling in a more formalized course. Or if like you're later in your career and you want to do a career transition, I think that's a great way to get a taster as well before kind of making that big commitment of paying for a degree.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, one that chimed with me specifically is Tom's point about the role of a degree as a status symbol in kind of a marketing thing. I think that can be a big impact sometimes. Not always, it shouldn't always, it should be, but sometimes, unfortunately, it is. So with that being said, the next question is specifically to Tom. Sorry, it's so specific, but it's the most upvoted one. Tom, how did you make the transition to freelance? Did you use any of the existing freelance websites, or did you use your own connections?
So what did I do? I guess I became, I guess, a freelance data scientist a couple of years ago, and it's been good fun. I like it, but the hardest thing is, I guess, finding customers or finding the right sort of customers at the right time. And most of my initial work came through personal connections in some way. People I'd worked with in the past, people who I knew from meetups, that kind of thing. It's always easier to get, to be approached for work than to approach other people for work. It tends to work better. So I guess, yeah, most of my work has come through my personal network, and then subsequently through either referrals or repeat work from those initial clients. So if I do something good for them, they ask me back, or if the thing I made them at the start breaks, they ask me back. But either way, they ask me back. Yeah, and there are various sort of freelance websites, Upwork and the like. I guess the downside of that is that you are competing in a big pond, and there's nothing really to differentiate you from anyone else on that site. I think some people are successful in them. I don't really know, but I guess if you're more, I think you're more likely to be successful through recommendations or through getting, that kind of thing than through putting yourself on a website. But yeah, I don't think it's probably not at a stage where there are, where there's loads of, not every company needs a freelance data scientist. Most people, if they need one, they'll hire one full time, or they'll, or they don't need one. And so there's not a kind of an infinite demand for it, but if you can handle a little bit of uncertainty about where your paycheck's going to come from in the next couple of months, then it's good fun. Once you get over the terror of a contract coming to the end and there not being another one lined up, and if once that's happened successfully 2 or 3 times, then you kind of lose that terror and learn to relax in the times when you don't have work, which is, yeah, I've failed to do so far. Yeah. So but it's probably not. It's not for everyone. I don't think, but it's.
I think that's true. Does anyone else have any comments on freelance working? It's a bit of a niche question, so okay. No worries. The next most popular question, and I have to be honest, I don't know what the answer to this is. Are causal networks the next big thing? Reach, I want to put that on you. Like I say, I have no idea what a causal network is, so no, it's okay, no worries. Does anyone know what a causal network is?
No.
No, not really. No, they sound like they could be the next big thing.
Yeah.
I think it's the idea is that you can in some way infer causation through looking at big data sets, which I think is nonsense. But but if you could work out how to do it, it would be very good.
I mean, if that's what they're trying to do, then that does sound too good to be true, almost.
Yeah.
No, I can't say I've heard of them. Okay. Sorry to that anonymous questioner. We don't know. However, there is a follow-up for you, Tom, and your philosophical background. What do you think Immanuel Kant's take on them would be?
Oh, I've got no idea. I don't know Kant's views on causation. I know David Hume, who's a Scottish philosopher, has got a lot to say about causation, and he says that it's mostly an illusion. That all we actually ever see is 2 things happening next to each other, and that the causation, there's no actual thing in the world that is one thing causing another, and that we think that causation exists, but it doesn't.
It's just well, that's fascinating. I'm glad we got that question just for that. Which AI techniques, which I think we're looking more at ML techniques, if we're speaking technically, which ML techniques would you suggest to prospective data scientists would be most useful? So in areas like NLP, XAI, CNNs, deep neural networks, XGBoost, random forest. What AI techniques do you kind of stand by and use as find most useful in your work? I think, Eslyn, we've not asked you for a little bit. Sorry to dump that one on you, but anything you find useful?
I think I would say I mostly used different experiment different models to begin with. So I like to have a look at classification, regression, or clustering, and yeah, that's all I could say about that.
Okay, no worries. Sorry to drop that one on you so quickly.
Take it.
Yeah, Rachel, do you have anything to add?
Not specifically about what you should learn, but if you do kind of practice in anticipation of applying for, a data job, and you're looking at, which of these techniques that you should be practicing, I'd say it's more about why you choose to use one over another, as opposed to, learn this one. I think they have different uses in different contexts, and so I'd say, play around with the data set, decide, what you want to learn from that data set, and kind of go from there, and be able to explain, why you made the decision to use that one, and like why you used it, as opposed to I used this kind of thing.
Yeah. Mark?
Yeah, I completely agree with what Rachel just said. That the techniques in general are not the important thing. The important thing is being able to decide what's the thing that you're going to need to answer the question that you want to answer, given the data you've got. That's actually really important data science skill, being able to do that effectively. Using the wrong tool for a job is like using a wrong, it's like using a hammer to try and saw something with it. It won't do what you want it to do. So actually, that's the important thing. Having said that, in that list of possibilities that you gave at the beginning was not a homogeneous group, and I would say that explainable AI is going to be very important in the kind of short to medium term. Because the gap between our understanding of why systems are making the decisions they're making and what the system's capacity to make those decisions is growing. So it's going to be a really important area.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. Tom?
I guess there's two. I've got two answers. There's the sort of like start simple answer, and then there's the sort of more interesting answer. The start simple one probably is like logistic regression. Is you learn that, be good at doing that, and understand how to get a messy data set and put it into a logistic regression and build a simple classifier, on an end-to-end basis. So starting with messy data from various sources, but not from a nice neat CSV that you've downloaded from Kaggle or whatever. Get heterogeneous messy data and do a logistic regression. So the skill there that you're learning is data cleaning rather than data understanding rather than modeling. I suppose to answer the question more directly on the AI kind of techniques that I'm excited about at the moment are the kind of large-scale language models that are going on at the moment. They are some of the breakthroughs that are happening are exciting, I think, and warrant some of the hype that has been that has surrounded them. I suspect that the next iteration of the extra large transformer language model will be something quite exciting, and when people figure out how to actually use these things, they will have a big impact on our lives, for good or for bad. So understanding them is worth trying to do.
That makes sense. I mean, I think one of the interesting points with that is for an awful lot of certainly industrial applications, a lot of them do essentially the same job, so it doesn't matter that much. Don't worry too much about understanding the intricacies of every single model, because like with the books, you can't learn everything. This is a very good question, at least one that I've been thinking about a lot. Do data scientists make good salespeople? Rachel, what do you think?
Oh gosh, I don't know if I'm the right person to answer this. I was kind of hoping there was a different question you were about to ask.
Sorry.
Do data scientists make good salespeople? I feel like they ought to, but I do. Sorry, I don't know if I have an answer for this. I'll pass on to somebody else.
No worries. Anyone else want to jump in?
I think that generally being a scientist can make you not a good salesperson, because you tend to want to tell the truth to some extent, and so people ask you if your thing works, and you say, "Oh, not really," but so that can hinder sales, but it can also, I found, be good for sales. If people develop trust in you, they will buy stuff from you, and eventually, So I think that if if you're trying to sell a mass market product and through, you know, to lots of people, being a scientist isn't a good thing to be. But if you're trying to develop a long-term trusting relationship with somebody, speaking the truth is good, whether in any field, I suppose.
Dave, sorry, Mark, you got something to add?
No.
Okay.
Sales definitely on.
Anyone, Eslyn, you got anything to add for that, or should we move on?
Well, I think working as a data scientist, I mean, if you understand the business, if you're quite familiar with the business, then you could sort of sell a product quite easily, especially when you love people. So yeah, I think, yeah, there's quite a few data scientists who are good at making a sales pitch and being successful.
I think it's a really good point. I mean, very few people get the same perspective of, you know, down in the dirt, nitty-gritty data perspective of a business.
Yeah.
And that's a rare perspective, I think.
I think as long as the data scientists can also kind of speak to a non-technical audience, then that would benefit the sales aspect of it. But that's also an important quality, is being able to talk to, you know, a diverse team about the data and the insights that you get from it as well.
Yeah. I think I know which question you wanted me to ask, Rachel. Okay. So keyboard shortcuts help data scientists code faster. Does this unfairly benefit tall people with big hands and cause gender bias? Go on, Rachel.
Sorry, because that one was at the top of Slido when I looked when you asked the last question, and it kind of made me chuckle because I don't think keyboard shortcuts are the problem when it comes to bias in data. I think there's a lot of cultural and political and various other things that kind of create and reveal bias in data and data environments. So I don't think it's about keyboard shortcuts. I think, you know, you should make sure that you have diverse perspectives on your team, but it's not just about bringing in people with different backgrounds in your team, you know, for the sake of tokenism, but you also need to create a culture to keep people so that they can thrive. And because, you know, we all, the studies have shown that, you know, diverse teams, you know, get better insights. You need diverse perspectives, get the most out of your data, get maximum impact. But you're not going to get that if your culture is bad. So you need to, really create environments as opposed to keyboard settings to really get the best out of it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a particularly controversial thing, but I think that is the far more important point of what does cause the bias and how can we address it, both within our workplaces and within our programs. Has anyone else got any thoughts on that as opposed to keyboard shortcuts?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with Rachel's point. I think the last two questions kind of relate to one another as well, because so the data science job is not just about hacking good code. Most data scientists work in multidisciplinary teams, so they're going to have to be able to deal with diversity at least in that respect. And I absolutely agree with the point that you made, Rachel, that diverse teams lead to better outcomes. I've seen that time and time again. Always try and seek out somebody who has a different point of view to use if you want to improve your point of view. Really happens all the time. So we encourage it on our program. So one of the things that we do is that we across the pathways. So we have like people from social science backgrounds, as I mentioned earlier on, from business backgrounds and various science backgrounds, as well as computer science and maths. And we always, when we're forming teams, we always have cross-disciplinary teams as part of that. We also, as part of our recruitment strategy, deliberately make our overseas students are very diverse, so we don't have one market. They're from across the world. And we're reasonably gender balanced. We're not quite 50-50. We've actually found that interesting little thing here was that we have a higher number of offers going to female applicants, but a lower number of those convert into actual students. And we don't quite know why that process is happening between those 2 points. The female students appear to be dropping off before actually arriving at a greater rate than the male students. You always have some drop off in an applicant pool, but it seems to be differentially affecting men and women. We don't quite know why that is, but this is kind of interesting. But we aim for equality roughly in gender and a good diverse group in terms of country of origin and a good diverse group in terms of disciplinary background, and it enriches everybody's experience. I mean, that's the key point.
Yeah. Tom, Eslin, anything else to add?
Not for me. I think they've said it all.
Yeah, no, I would tend to echo everything that's been said. That, you know, generally having an inclusive as possible culture in your organization is you know, a huge benefit in lots of ways for everyone. And yeah, there's still isn't there everywhere. I don't think. How you go about changing that? I don't think I personally have the, you know, that's a solution, but I'm you know, I think it is something that people should concentrate on. I think that being tall, it makes it harder to use. Having a very large hands makes it difficult to use most keyboard peripherals and mice. So I would disagree with the premise of the original question.
Full circle there. All right. We're coming towards the end of the time available, so I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Like, I'm going to try and get through quite a few questions. We can try and keep our answers really short. What dashboarding tool do you normally use, Mark?
I usually make my own. That's it.
Okay, cool. Rachel?
I don't anymore as a community manager.
Fair enough. Eslin, dashboarding tools?
I usually make my own as well.
Would that be in Python?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Tom?
If I was doing something like that, I have used Shiny, our framework, but I like Shiny, but I try to avoid Power BI and Tableau. I don't know why. I don't find them very much fun to use once you're used to scripting languages.
Fair enough. Does SQL have a place in data scientist? In data science, should I learn it? Eslin?
Yes, it does. It's actually one of the highest in demand skill in data science. So because it's used to query a database, and it quickly filters and returns only the result you are looking for. So yes, it's in high demand. Good
answer. Tom?
Yeah, absolutely. It's fairly straightforward to learn the basics of selecting things in SQL. And if there are lots of circumstances where if you don't know it, you're very stuck. I've been writing SQL all day today on trying to explore a new database. If I didn't know it, I'd have to learn
it. Mark?
Yeah, exactly the same answer. Actually, just got a new database, access to a new database today, which is in SQL. So I'm going to have to be doing that. So yeah, basic skills. You don't need to be a kind of whizzy expert at it, but yeah, you do need some basic skills.
Yep. Rachel?
Yes.
Okay. Last question. How important are MLOps for data scientists? Should that not be addressed by ML engineers? So in case you're not aware, MLOps is kind of the practice of productionizing machine learning products. Eslin, start with you. I think that's
yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I think they're very important. And so MLOps sort of drive insights you can trust and like put into play more quickly in a controlled manner. So yeah.
Yep. Mark. Nope. Tom. MLOps.
Yeah, I guess it depends what kind of data scientist you are. You know, there are some data scientists who it's not relevant for, but there are some who it will be relevant for. You know, as I said before, it's useful to have some understanding of cloud technologies to be a data scientist. If you're in a smaller organization and you need to deploy things, it's unlikely you'll have a dedicated ML ops or ML engineering team. So knowing something about that is useful. The tools are rapidly changing, and there's lots of them, and there isn't really a single tool set. So it's a tricky skill to learn because of that, but also because of that, the skills are highly in demand because it's a new thing. There's nobody who's got 10 years of ML ops experience, or there's maybe a handful in the world. But yeah, so it's useful to learn, but it might not be essential. For depending on where you are.
Yeah. Rachel, Mark, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I think it might be something that'll have been and gone in a not too distant future.
Controversial. Okay. I think we got time for one more question. Reproducibility is becoming increasingly important. What steps can you take to improve your work in this regard? Rachel.
Yeah, so definitely important, especially in academic data science as well. I would say I won't go like throw too much stuff out, but I would say something that's very important is script your analysis. The less pointing and clicking that you do, the better. So use tools such as R or Python instead of maybe Excel. Version control, like I mentioned before, really useful for keeping track of what you're working on and seeing how it progresses and being able to quickly fix something if it breaks. Reproducible environments are really important. So even if you write a simple Python script, if somebody else tries to run it on their computer and they're using either a different version of Python or they've got a different operating system, it can very easily break. So containers are a great solution for this. Something like Docker or Singularity to really capture the environment and the versions and dependencies and all that sort of thing. And then finally, I'll just say documentation is so important. So especially in academia, this is like one of my favorite quotes from software carpentry. Your biggest collaborator is yourself, like 6 months from now or 6 months in the past, and your future self doesn't answer emails, kind of thing. So and especially when you're working on teams, it's really important to make sure that everything's really well documented in order to rerun that and get the results.
Yeah, so often overlooked, but so important. Got any thoughts on reproducibility from anyone else?
Rachel said it all.
Yeah, that was a great answer. that should definitely go on the FAQs.
I definitely add those stuff on. Anything more from you, Aslan?
Well, I mean, I think reproducibility is all about being transparent about exactly what was done in your experiment and what the results were. So, as Rachel said, I think it's very important to like when you write coding scripts for like processing data, automate as much of the data analysis as you can, and also. After automating data analysis, I would say publish all the code, and it's good to like disclose negative and or convoluted results. Though I know negative results are often low impact, they are still important. So hypotheses aren't always supported by data. So sometimes results can be quite complicated or convoluted, so to be easily interpreted. So yeah, and also increase transparency of data and the statistics.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's very toxic in academia, but definitely the importance of negative results.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. I'll leave you with one follow-up thought, if not a question, to pull up Rachel's point. If tall people are, if you don't think that tall people are better scientists, then perhaps they are worse data scientists instead. But we're not going to go into that negative thought. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a delight. We'll try and share these data FAQs via Twitter. The repository will be available on GitHub. We'll make sure we share that. Thank you to our sponsors. Thank you to the UK Data Service for helping us put this on. And most importantly, thank you to all of our panelists for sharing their insight today. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Thank you for having me. Thank
Thank
you.
you.